Yeah.
I know, I know. It can be a little out of hand sometimes, but yeah, it was a good group, good discussion. They're finding their way. I
Yeah,
think the
finding their
governance model
way.
they chose will be good
Yeah,
for.
me too.
Yeah, we're kind of feeling like it's more spread
Good,
out.
good leadership at this point too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice to see it come.
yeah. I'm excited. Yeah, yeah, good. Hey, I've got a few questions for you on the transport item. Do you want to chat about that now or later? Transport. The report from
I
Haddock.
liked the way I wrote it. Thank you.
Okay. I was just curious, did you really want to include Ray Kendra's proposal even though you're asking for proposals? Like,
No, we're not even going down Ray's path. We're not going to do anything.
okay, but you, one of the attachments you included was a proposal from Ray Kendra.
That was to build, to design, bid, and do the bid documents for the general neutral.
Restaurants.
No,
Yeah.
no, we're
Okay.
done. That's
Right.
off the table.
So why even include?
Because there's one sentence in there that he says that he would miss doing Station 2 because it's not worth the money.
Oh, okay, okay. Then we should probably mention that maybe in the memo so they
I
know.
tried to, but it wouldn't copy over the one because what I had it highlighted.
Oh, well, we could fix it. And then the other thing.
No,
there were a couple
that's why I
things.
put the memo. I was going to highlight and say, look, and that's when I asked them. I said, we're going to spend $320,000 for spaces, put it into our stations where we've had two different architects or firms say,
Hello. Are we the inaugurated?
right,
Look
right.
at this.
Okay, okay. Well, I could add some language in there to that effect if you'd like to make it
Some
clear.
bluff, our cloakroom.
Okay, and then
Oh, the cloakroom.
you had mentioned something
But
about
yeah,
maybe
so you haven't been in
including-
here before?
I'll take it
Haven't
out,
been?
but I like to see it.
It must have just started.
Okay, and then the law enforcement center piece. There was a
No,
memo
it's
about-
like-
It's
Well, I thought
Kind
it
of-
was
Sure.
And
I'm
look
gonna
at
bring it up
this.
as
No.
an
Oh my god!
ad hoc
Oh my
discussion.
god!
But,
I missed
uh,
the big
talk
pictures
about
in the
that
back,
too.
though.
That's
I
what
like
the
the photos.
commission would like to see happen.
In that, you said in conjunction with
ARPA
Fire
funds?
Station 1, but you're talking about, the question is whether or not the commission would want to have gender neutral restrooms.
No.
Okay, it wasn't clear to me.
Gender neutral.
And then explain when we get to it.
I know it's up, I know that. Right, right. It wasn't clear to me what you were referencing with respect to the police department.
The police department is, there's been that discussion that if we were to ever do something over there, that we would just move the police department over next to the fire.
That's what I thought you meant. Okay, okay.
And
Then
you
I'd
can
like to
change-
make that a little
yeah,
clearer.
yeah.
Okay.
And I
Yeah, no,
wanted
I
to
know
say-
the restrooms are off the table. Yeah.
No, what I was trying to do, but I'm gonna say, if you want to do this, I'm not saying you should, the ad hoc committee gets recommended. You have to tell us now.
Okay.
Or forever hold your peace.
Okay, then I'll tweak the language a little just to, okay.
Because I don't wanna sit there and say, someone comes back and say, well, did y'all think of this? Yes.
Right.
We decided we didn't wanna do it.
Yeah.
So, if Amy doesn't like, well, it's said, good, next time she's gonna.
All right, all right. No, those were just my
I'm a little
thoughts reading
agitated
through.
right now, if you can tell.
Okay. Well, I caught you in a bad moment.
Well, no, it's not
Just
just
trying
you,
to help.
it's just other shit that I,
Yeah.
not only here, but in Upper Rapids.
Yes. Right.
Warner, are you sitting next to me? Where, right there?
Almost. And one person in between you, Anna Deturi.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
well,
Oh.
that ought to keep things safe.
Oh.
That ought to keep things safe.
Wow. Well, that's very exciting.
Maybe.
Okay,
My son bought a vintage.
problem, I moved something around.
Are you taking off again in Tuesday?
Yeah.
Presentation.
Today.
Sean's gonna have to stay till the end. So
My
not allowed to, I guess,
I've never been there.
okay, I will agree.
But yeah, my sister's been there and her husband.
Very much.
Letting them.
It just makes me, with my personality, like,
But we're so nice.
That's very nice.
yeah, I mean, I've got mine. I'm obviously modeling that behavior.
Has the wood.
You know, I
Such
think
nice wood.
there were coasters in here earlier. Yeah, I know.
This fine
I don't like
limit.
being told those things either. Someday.
I've been in one.
See, I asked if the staff pit was still here and they told me no.
That's even worse. A trip, like, oh, let's trip over this as you fall into there.
How's that OSHA compliant?
What's that?
How's that
I think you
OSHA?
did miss one.
I don't have the first clue.
Half of our.
No, it can't be.
Right. But he didn't come until the end of the year. He came the first time.
Can't be, right?
Okay.
So maybe I missed one in Mexico.
Right.
I have not
Like,
seen
it's
him.
worse than.
I referred to it as the Stardust earlier.
Someone gets in a war, the first person to totally fall off.
Right.
$20 to whoever falls in.
Oh, it'll be me. I can almost guarantee it'll be one late night, I'll be seated over there. I'll just go a little wide to avoid somebody and forget, and I'll fall right off.
Stop your chance.
Wow.
I could test it. Test the chair.
So I was looking to see who you were talking about because I thought we must be here this time. Well, yeah. When was he appointed?
Patience.
I do not. They had to rebuild the whole thing.
But is he here today?
No, somebody did.
You guys are gonna get called when I fall off the back of this one, Nick.
Well, look at that kickboard, I'm glad you got it, somebody's gotta take a dive off that.
Right?
Yeah,
He was at the first meeting. After his appointment, he was at that meeting. And you, I think, were too. But it was before.
It's nicer.
No, because we were both on the same plane.
Well, hi. It's a good facelift.
Oh, yeah, with some of the
Did I forget to turn mine off now? No, it was just.
This is fancy. I don't even know what to do.
Oh, by the way, hi.
Well, you're right, it's continuous crankers.
Oh God, it's a crane?
No, no,
Better
no.
or worse than it's in the front?
We had those.
Wait, does it go
investors
forward, up, or down?
noticing it was
Oh, I can do what's back?
Oh, no, it's reclining.
the sound system.
It's my back just fell.
Oh, okay. Little lumbar support.
Woo. Okay, this is gonna be problematic now, because now I don't know how to make it go back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did you go forward?
Trying. Let's hope that works.
Strange.
Oh, I don't know about all this.
Yeah, you have to go like really far to get the resistance.
Where is this? Oh,
I wasn't. One of our favorites.
are you heading out to Cali again? Or-
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, great.
What is this one?
Take a week and jet out there.
Good.
Great.
Gets my son.
Dad fell down before he got here. Knocked his
Whoa.
head, bleeding over.
Well,
I better get some pictures of
well,
that.
it's like, kids aren't going, so it's some fun to drive.
Oh, we are gonna take care of it.
No, they get those.
That's
Right.
Well, this particular trip is
All right, we'll get started in about 1 minute.
I have been to one of these.
So I wore the heavy
Like a
sweater
Steve
thinking I was gonna be stuck under the vent next door.
It's warm already, yeah.
And I'm very,
I'm confused with these mics though. That's you, this is me? Or are they?
Very discombobulated.
Not used to being back in this room.
Please come back in the room. My
The
chair.
chairs?
They're very high. Do this thing at some point.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We'll be starting our session tonight. We have a study session, the first part of the study session will be a joint study session with the Planning Commission. We welcome the members here. Glad to have you back again. I'm glad you're still willing to sit next to me, despite me. Anyway, we would like to begin our meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we are gathered is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. We also ask tonight, as we go through our conversation and dialogue with each other, that we do so with respect, dignity, patience, and charity with each other. With that, how are we going to do the roll call, Benjamin?
I think we can do a silent roll call.
I think that was wonderful. Boy, I heard my name called here. All right. Okay, we have some announcements from the city manager way over there.
Yes.
just a reference in terms of this evening in the special meeting, we will not go into depth in terms of the project, but just bring up the fact that it's for a public hearing, just to make sure it's clear of the intent. Thank you.
Announcements from the city clerk.
Yes, I have a few announcements tonight. So meetings for this week, the week of March 13th, we've got the City Commission Ad Hoc Committee for the Beitner Request for Proposals item is going to meet on Tuesday, March 14th. That'll be at 9:30 a.m. in the committee room, which is on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The March Board of Tax Review will meet on Tuesday, March 14th from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's in the second floor training room of the Governmental Center. Traverse City Light and Power Board will meet on Tuesday, March 14th at 5:15 p.m. in the Commission Chambers on the second floor of the Governmental Center. And the Arts Commission will meet on Wednesday, March 15th at 3:30 p.m. in the second floor training room here in the Governmental Center. Brown Bridge Advisory Committee is meeting on Thursday, March 16th at 5:15 p.m. in the training room on the second floor of the Governmental Center. And finally, with respect to meetings this week, the Downtown Development Authority Board will meet on Friday, March 17th at 9 a.m. in the Commission Chambers. As always, information regarding those meetings is available on the city's website by clicking on the calendar icon. Just a few quick community updates. The second round of engagement related to the conceptual designs for the Tart Trail Improvement and Extension Project are taking place on March 15th and March 16th, and there's virtual and in-person options available for those. And more information can be found on the project section of the city's website. Also, the Mobility Action Plan Project is hosting a public engagement session to seek input on the proposed mobility network map. That's on March 15th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Alluvion, which is in the Common Grounds building located at 414 East 8th Street. And again, that's from 3 to 7 p.m. A few awards that we're currently actively seeking nominations for are with respect to the Coast Guard Committee. They're inviting nominations for their Guardian Award. And the Guardian Award is established to honor members of the Coast Guard, family members of those individuals, or entire families who are active at Air Station Traverse City and have shown exceptional community service. Also, the Human Rights Commission is currently accepting nominations for the 2023 Sarah Hardy Humanitarian Award. That award recognizes contributions of individuals who have exemplified ideals of the Human Rights Commission, which are to promote understanding and mutual respect among all people and to discourage discriminatory practices. And submissions for both awards are due on March 31st, and forms for those nominations can be found on the city's webpage under the Appointed Boards and Commissions section. And lastly, we're excited to announce, of course, while this is our first time in this room, since it's been renovated, the city also just recently installed the original artwork in the lobby of the Commission Chambers, so just out in the hallway there. And that's artwork from the Mazanadan exhibition. And you might recall that that project was a partnership between the city and the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. And digital reproductions of those work are on display in the Clinch Park Tunnel. So that's all that I've got, other than just to remind everyone up here to speak into your microphones. Thank you.
It's not on the agenda, but are there any special announcements that need to come from the Planning Commission that you're aware of?
We have none.
Okay, thank you. I would take the privilege of doing a couple of things first with permission of the Chair of the Planning Commission. First of all, we wanted to make a presentation there will be a presentation by the City Manager Marty Colburn for the 2022 Employee of the Year. We're going to do this and another one so they don't have to stay any longer than need to be. So, Mr. Colburn.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners and everybody else in the audience. First, I'd like to call up Allison Geisert. Please come on up, Allison. Allison works in the HR department, and during this last year, there has been a tremendous amount of workload that she has really stepped up to. We work with not just all the current staff, but retirees, all types of different carriers in terms of insurance, retirements, and she's just been really grasping that and running with it. So each year, our management team works together and goes through different reviews of some of the staff that do outstanding jobs. And this year, we wanted to recognize as the 2022 Employee of the Year, Allison. So Allison, thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I'm honored to have received this award. In the nomination this past year has been a very eventful one, and I couldn't have made it through without the support of everyone within the city. So thank you.
She wants to share you in the Babe Reef, so.
The next award is for the Department of the Year.
Yes, and somewhat the same process that the departments, some of the departments are nominated by other departments, and we discussed through the management team who has excelled this particular year. And at this point, wanted to invite Alex Yockey, who was to be, there he is. Alex, thank you for being here this evening. This year, the engineering department for 2022 was selected as Department of the Year. They had gone through a number of different projects, but specifically want to recognize also the hard work that's been ongoing with the bridges throughout the city. So that being said, all the efforts of the entire team are appreciated, but particularly wanted to recognize the engineering department for the year 2022. Alex? And the third one I have here is for, through the Michigan Municipal Executives. This is the state's city managers organization that works with all of us in terms of our professional continuation of education and opportunities to work with Michigan Municipal League and the many efforts that are ongoing through that organization. One of the things that the MME does is have several awards each year to different city managers throughout the course of the year. And at this point, I'd like to call up Penny Hill. Penny was nominated and was selected through a competitive process through MME as the Outstanding Assistant City Manager for this state of Michigan, and of course representing Traverse City. So Penny would like to thank you for the many efforts that you've done, and particularly she was recognized with her work through working with NAGPRA, which is, and I'm going to let her just get into the top elements of that as to some of the good works that you've done on that. But again, thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. So thank you very much. This is really a great honor for me. NAGPRA is the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, and I've been fortunate in Traverse City to work with many, many wonderful people in the tribes to repatriate two ancestors back to the earth. It's been a great honor and a very humbling experience, so I'm really happy to get this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, now for the topics of our joint study session. We have 3 updates relating to work that's ongoing. First update will be the master plan update, and who gets to lead this? Okay. Jason.
I'll go ahead and start. So good evening, Planning and City Commissioners. Sean Winter, City Planning Director. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to convene both boards jointly. Today we'll be going over the updates of our 3 projects as well as facilitating some discussions. We will start with the master plan, then we'll give an update on the mobility action plan, followed by a new project since we last met, which is the Tart Trail Improvement and Extension Project, which is underway. So I will hand it over now to Sarah Capriva and Elise Crafts for the master plan.
So we're going to give you a brief update on the tourism work that we've done recently. We had a couple of workshops on it, and Elise is going to give you kind of the background, or I'm sorry, the report out on that just real quick. You had a copy of the report in your packet, and then I'm going to get into our presentation talking a little bit more about housing.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm not going to spend too much time on the report that was included in your packet. It's just 2 pages, but I wanted to give everyone just a quick overview in case you didn't have a chance to read that thoroughly on why we held those 2 sessions called Planning for Tourism to inform the master plan process, and then what we heard, and then take any questions or comments from you. So we wanted to explore the impacts of tourism on all of the other pieces that go into the master plan, so transportation, housing, our economy, local streets, natural resources, et cetera. And this was a topic that was we were hearing about in the first online survey and the open house. So we wanted to explore this with the community in a little bit more depth. We met with the community twice, once virtually and once at the library, to solicit their ideas on what does planning for sustainable tourism look like in Traverse City to you, and how can the city support that vision? And those are the results that are summarized in your packet. So you'll see when we asked, what does sustainable tourism mean to you, folks mentioned a balance between promotion and preservation of natural and cultural assets. They talked about prioritizing resident quality of life along with tourism experience here. And then when we asked, how can the city support sustainable tourism, we were pleased that many of the suggestions relate to topics that you have direct control over and are working on right now. So we received suggestions about ensuring infrastructure is planned for and maintained, maintaining a connected transportation network, advertising and making sure that folks understand how to use the public transportation resources that exist, protecting natural resources in Traverse City, and then regulating short-term rentals, particularly looking at the density of rentals to prevent clustering of neighborhoods that are entirely short-term rentals, but ensuring that balance. So that's a very quick, high-level summary of a high-level summary. Happy to take any questions or comments before we move to the meat of the presentation on housing. Sure.
I'll try to be nicer than last time, I apologize. But it's along the same veins. So with only 42 people on Zoom and 19 people in person, and I was able to stand in the back for some of the 19 people, and they're great questions, they're great answers, it's good input, but how do you use this information, how do you suggest we use this information from so few people to potentially inform a master plan if there really is going to be a tourism chapter?
So again, with every engagement opportunity, right, we put the invitation out, and folks who decide to engage are those who attend. So it's important to note that the engagement we're soliciting is of those 42 plus 19 people who attended, right? This isn't an exhaustive commentary from everyone who works, lives, and plays in Traverse City. But we need this data so that we can start to guide your action plan and the master plan. And we wanted to be sure that we were pulling out themes for, particularly that second question, what should the city be doing to implement sustainable tourism in Traverse City? We wanted to see what those ideas were from the community. And we were pleased that, again, those ideas are consistent, that were shared from the folks who attended. Those action steps and recommendations are consistent with actions and recommendations that you're already working on related to transportation, land use regulation, infrastructure maintenance. We didn't see anything coming out of these discussions that was a real red or yellow flag that we need to talk to you about, hey, we're gonna really need to focus on this tourism best practice in Traverse City because the community is really up in arms about this. The issues that were raised are issues that I think are already on your radar and are pieces that you're already working on, either at the Planning Commission or City Commission level, or would already be included in the master plan. So really, I think no news is good news here with this topic.
I guess my follow-up to that is, again, this is all great input, but more valuable to me is to hear from people that we never hear from. My guess is these are people that have attended other meetings over the years, have sent us emails, but what about what I consider the vast majority of people that we never hear from, wherever they might live in the city, but especially maybe a socioeconomic status that doesn't allow them to have the time to participate.
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to say to Commissioner Warner's point, I know that it's difficult. We have city commission meetings where we decide millions of dollars in budget that 2 people show up for. And so to a point we're elected as representatives, I appreciate any and all future efforts that might come to your head about how we could engage with different people at different times. I did appreciate that I participated in the Zoom at 2 p.m. because at 7 p.m. that evening I was going to be here at the commission chambers. So I think the offering a couple different times is a good thing that you have started doing, and maybe look at diversifying those availabilities, also in a very accessible public place. So I thought that was really excellent. And the one thing I really wanted to compliment you on, and I admit that I'm not a Luddite, but I'm not the most tech-savvy person. But I thought it was really great because for those who didn't get to participate during the Zoom, and I believe I was told that they did it in person as well, that there were real-time interactions for how these were measured. And I liked that because it did allow everybody who was participating to weigh in on every issue, but it also didn't force someone to come up and speak in front of people, maybe who just disagreed with the exact opposite of what they thought, and feel that kind of pressure that can sometimes happen when you're speaking publicly or you want to get up and speak, but somebody just, maybe vehemently and came out and said, no, I think short-term rentals are going to save this town. It made it easier for someone who maybe disagrees to not have to publicly confront through opposing public comment their thoughts on, and that wasn't one of the questions, by the way, I was just using it as an example. But I really appreciated that it allowed everybody to interact without having to get up and speak where they might be uncomfortable or feel uncomfortable compared to others in the room.
Well, I'm glad you liked that tool because we'll be using it again tonight.
Excellent.
Good.
I have one other thing. I was on the Zoom as well, and I thought one of the most striking takeaways was something that we should keep in mind as we're thinking about the master plan, and that was the perception of the people who are on the Zoom call of how much of our economy is based from tourism, and it came out to be 66%, and the reality was it's 20%. So I think it's always important for us to keep that in mind, that that is not our biggest moneymaker in this town. And that's important as we think about the master plan and serving the entire community.
Thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner, Chairperson Hassing, doesn't the Planning Commission have some plans to attend neighborhood meetings? And hasn't Commissioner Duterte already done this for the boardman? So that is a way to reach people that would not necessarily show up to a Zoom call or at this meeting.
Yeah, well, we've been invited to a couple of neighborhood association meetings. We also want to reach out to neighborhoods that don't have associations so that we can really reach out to as deep into the community as we can. And so Sarah, I believe, is going to speak to the neighborhood meetings we'll have planned for when the weather opens up a little bit. As well, we all volunteered for pop-ups for the original round of surveys that happened for the master plan, and we'll continue those again, when the weather opens up again.
Great. You already asked, and I got the answer to my question, so thanks.
In terms of what you mentioned, Commissioner Shaw and Hassing, even if the topic is strictly like housing or master plan or what have you, the conversation definitely wanders, and I think it's good to have somebody there because you are able to address other topics that might come out, even if like it was a housing panel and we had some conversations around other topics. So it's a good avenue as well.
All right. Anything else on tourism? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk housing. Thank you.
Well, this has definitely been a hot topic, housing, of late at the Planning Commission level for sure, but we've all seen all the different news articles about it, and so we thought it'd be a great opportunity while you were all together to kind of talk about it. And as Elise mentioned, we are going to be using the similar function that we had on Zoom and we did do during our meeting at the library on tourism, and that's Mentimeter. So on your desk, there's a small slip, and it has how you can get access to it. So there'll be some questions. I have a little bit of information first, and then we'll get into the questions about that. So feel free to log on with your phone or your computer on the internet, which you're usually probably not allowed to do during a meeting, to be able to participate. If you have any trouble, feel free to let me know, and we'll work through that. So housing by the numbers. So this is just I'm just gonna do a quick overview for you of some of the numbers of the city of Traverse City and the region. If you want more details, more explanations about any of these numbers, the housing chapter has been reviewed by the leadership team. It's in the leadership team packet. It's also on the tcmasterplan.org website under the draft sections of the plan. That is the original first draft of the chapter. It does not incorporate any of the changes that the leadership team has already talked about into that, and so just keep that in mind that there will be some changes moving forward, but that kind of gives you a rough idea of what we've been talking about. So for the housing, I do want to set a little definition in for you for micropolitan area. So this is a defined area by the census. It's a urban kind of cluster area that has a population of at least 10,000, but less than 50,000. It includes the county that that urban area is in and the adjacent counties. So your micropolitan area is Leelanau, Benzie, Grand Traverse, and Kalkaska counties in there. And when I'm talking tonight, I think I did a good job of this, but when I'm talking about Traverse City, I'm talking about the city of Traverse City, the proper Traverse City, not the general area. So housing units, these are all units within the municipality. These are single-family apartments. They're a dwelling unit. We consider a housing unit. This comes from the census as well. A lot of this information does. You can see Traverse City has about 8,500, and the micropolitan has about 85,000 housing units. We put in there the housing units by municipality. These municipalities are Grand Traverse County, as well as the counties at the bottom that are in the micropolitan area. You'll see here the change between 2010 and 2020. The city increased 14% for housing units, but you'll also see Garfield Township is right there. They're 15%. Long Lake is right around 12, just under 12%. And the county as a whole changed by 10%, Grand Traverse County did. This is a statistic I think the Planning Commission has seen. I'm not sure about City Commission. But these are housing permits just in the city, so the city of Traverse City. You can see the increase of just housing units in the last couple of years that have grown, and I think the Planning Commission's felt that in their approvals, potentially with the multifamily, but also just in development in general throughout the city. Here we have some occupancy rate numbers for you. The vacancy includes your second homes, houses that are for sale, migrant housing, short-term rentals. Basically a home or a dwelling, I should say a dwelling, that does not have anyone living in it at the time of the census. That is your vacancy rate. You can see here that Traverse City, the city of Traverse City, is at 13% versus the micropolitan area at 24%. So you have a very high occupancy rate on your dwelling units.
Do you have a sense of how that number has changed from 2010 to 2020?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's in the chapter.
Okay. Just it might be an indication of how many are actual primary residences for folks and how many are just pseudo hotels or whatever they're being called nowadays. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and that does go into this next slide. So this is seasonal housing. So these are your second homes, potentially your vacation rentals, your recreational uses or occasional use homes. So it could be a cabin, a hunting cabin somebody has that might qualify as a dwelling unit, or just kind of, I'm going to say seasonal or occasional occupancy. So you can see here the change over the years, and this is out of your total housing units. So this is out of those 8,500 units, 5% of the city's housing units are seasonal. You can see
Does that include short-term rentals?
That would, yes. If they were at the time, if they were, a second home, if they didn't have somebody permanently living in them. And so you'll see that's consistent from the census data. 5% was in 15 and 3% in 10. So it has gone up a couple of percentages. Yes?
So can you just help explain the difference between the 5% in 2020 and the 13% in 2020?
From back here?
Yeah.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah. The vacancy rate includes homes that were for rent but were empty, for sale but were empty, were sold but were empty, and migrant housing. So that vacancy rate, 13%, is not the same number that's on the seasonal slide. That seasonal slide is only for your second homes or potentially recreational properties.
I'm sorry, so what, does this capture, like if somebody splits their time between here, somewhere in the south in the winter, or here and somewhere in the north in the summer, whichever way they might go, does it capture whether this is their primary or secondary, like where they vote,
Right.
essentially? Like, where do they consider home?
It would depend on how they filled the census out. It would be their determination of where they consider their first and primary
Okay.
home.
All right, thanks.
So you'll see here, I mean, the micropolitan area, when I was putting this information together, I was surprised by how high a number they have for kind of these seasonal homes compared to the state and to the city. Looking at occupancy, homeowner versus renter occupancy, you can see that the city has a high percentage compared to the micropolitan area of renter occupancy. Almost 40% are renter housing units.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in with a similar to Commissioner Warner question.
Mm-hmm.
Are these for all or all occupied places, period, or again, is this people have declared themselves as this is their full-time home?
This would be somebody that declares it their full-time home
Okay.
on the census. Essentially, somebody that would live there that doesn't rent or would consider their house not to be a rental unit.
Well, I guess when I was looking at like the renters, you know, are people, I know that some people rent here for, you know, have apartments, but it's not their full-time place.
Oh,
So
I see
that
what
kind
you're
of
saying.
differential.
Yeah, these would be, I believe these would be the occupied. So these are people that are, so they wouldn't take into account that, the seasonal number.
Okay.
Because they're occupied units. So the vacancy number, the vacancy unit number, isn't included in the tenure,
Okay.
if I'm correct. Now I'm second guessing that. I can get back
If you
with
could
you
follow
for
up with
sure.
an email, just to
Yeah,
make sure, I'd be curious.
absolutely.
Thank
Well, it comprises 100%, so it would be,
But I'm wondering
you.
if,
But is it 100% of people who said, I live here permanently, or is it 100% of?
well, they
Of
either,
people's homes in
own it or
general.
rent it, so it seems to me these would be the occupied units.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to clarify, because it could just be, this is, how does your breakdown of where you live in the city
Right,
count?
But I
So,
only speculate, so yeah,
Right.
maybe some clearer titles.
I'll follow
on
it up.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you.
Age of housing, the reason we throw this in is because 35% of the housing stock in the city was built prior to 1939. Where you'll see in the micropolitan area, there it's 11%. So that's something to consider when you're working through your land use and your zoning components based on some historical properties. Housing types real quick. We've just called out kind of your single family, detached and attached, and your multifamily units. You'll see here that compared to the micropolitan area, the city has less single-family detached homes, and they have quite a bit more of the multifamily units. I don't think that comes to any surprise to anybody for that, but it does help to see how your housing units are laid out. Wanted to throw in really quick the home value distribution of the city versus the different counties. Something here that you'll note is you'll see like Leelanau County, the values are typically, you know, higher than the other counties, especially when compared to Kalkaska County. You'll see the colors line up with the same value markers, so you can see the difference for the housing values. But we've got Traverse City at the top there, and I was actually looking at this today. I think I'm going to move Grand Traverse County up so you can see a little bit better compared to your neighbors what the city looks like. Really quick, we talk a lot about household size in the master plan and in general, and always talk about how your household size has been shrinking over the years. And just put this together quickly so you can see the city of Traverse City, the household size and family size are less than both your micropolitan and the state of Michigan. And then the next slide, we have, this is national data to be able to compare it to. This came out of the zoning reform toolkit that Michigan Association of Planning just put out. They had this nice graph for the households, and you can see that the city of Traverse City falls under the national average as well. So for national trends and resources, most of you, if not all, have seen the document list. There might be a couple additional items on here. There's many more. This is the only amount of space I had on the slide to put on documents to take a look at related to housing and zoning. Don't be fooled, I guess, by the AARP and that they've put some of the information together it applies to all different age groups when they're talking. They do, they're based in a certain demographic, but they have some great information available, especially when you look at it in context of everything else of what's being talked about. So here's a quick kind of snapshot from one of the reports, actually from the AARP, that talked about 22% of Americans will be over 65 in 2050. There's a lot of younger adults living at home. I think we've heard that a lot, but 32% is what they're reporting. 48% of adults are single, and 27% of children live with a single parent. And then fewer than 11% of American households were middle class in 2015 than 1971. So just some interesting statistics about the changes in housing in our population.
Quick question, and this is a little bit getting in the dirt, but I'm just curious. When in the survey that was done, is the single, was the choice married or single, or is there single sometimes encapsulated when we're looking at housing, people who are not married living together?
I would have to take a look at the information because I believe it was just like a single person.
Okay. Just clarifying, thank you.
But I can double check that information when I respond to the
It's
other one.
it's not as important unless that data becomes much more pertinent through the rest of the studies as we go along. But I do know sometimes there can be antiquated ways of measuring that. So I was curious about basically heads per household.
Right. And then here's a list. This comes from the, again, the MAP zoning toolkit related to ways to zone for housing, and I know that this has been a talk. I'm sure the Planning Commission's talked about a couple of these different ways to work through zoning and ways to provide additional housing opportunities, collapsing your zoning districts, allowing, expanding your allowable uses, some reductions in lot sizes and areas. These are just here as these are options or things to look in further. I'm not making any recommendations on what you should do or shouldn't do. I'm throwing these out here so that everybody kind of has the same playing field when we're talking about ways that you could work through zoning for housing. So this is when you get to participate. So if you can use your phone or your computer and log into Mentimeter and just answer this question: how do you see Traverse City's population in the regional housing crisis? Should Traverse City be a leader, take its own direction, help the region moving forward, being a part of those discussions? Should we focus just on the city component of it, make sure that we're aligned with the regional goals but not necessarily the leader, or should we focus within the city borders independent of the region?
This is in general about the housing crisis, not about the master plan.
Correct, correct. And while these responses, they are all anonymous for how you're participating, after we get done with each of the questions, I will offer you an opportunity to kind of explain your answer if you'd like to, or to give a little bit more context to your answer. Okay, has everybody had an opportunity, I think, to do this? So we have 6 that say that Traverse City should be a leader. and 3 that talk about primarily focusing on the city but aligning with the regional goals. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to their answer or to explain anything? Or any general comments? Okay.
We'll just continue with housing then. I mean, I have a lot to say about housing. I think a lot of people have a lot to say, but I'm happy to continue with the presentation.
Okay. We want to take a look at the City Commission goals and priorities and the Planning Commission's goals this year and see if there's some areas where they align and you're able to move forward kind of together. You're here jointly, maybe have some of those discussions and how you can jointly work on some housing issues. So from the City Commission goals and priorities, we need community housing for all and increase opportunities for more diverse housing through public and private options. When we look at the Planning Commission goals related to expanding housing opportunities. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to see if this something went wrong is gonna, I don't know. Okay. So this is a list that we kind of distilled down based on your goals and your action items to say some of the commonalities are educate, build awareness, and promote diversity, provide incentives for housing developments.
Density.
Huh?
You said diversity, it says density.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, promote density. At the bottom, provide for diverse and inclusive housing options. Jumped ahead, I'm sorry. Support the transformation of underutilized areas for housing developments, remove regulatory barriers for housing developments, and ensure housing is developed within the context of climate change. So looking at these priorities that we've kind of distilled down, we're asking you to rank these from your most pressing, what you feel for the city of Traverse City is the most pressing, and then to number 6 to be the least pressing items. And keeping in mind, I know they are all important, it'll be difficult to determine kind of to rank them, but it'd be nice to see if there's a general consensus on where we should start on this.
I don't know how to work this thing.
Put Anna on the right spot there.
Okay. I want this to be number 1. Okay.
Okay, so it looks like the most pressing item is support the transformation of underutilized areas for housing development, and then number 2 would be to provide for diverse and inclusive housing options. And number 3 is ensure housing is developed within the context of climate change. And you can see the rest of the list here. Does anybody have any comments? Any reason you responded a certain way, or any just general comments about the results?
Yeah, to me, any additional housing units that are built within the city limits does address the third item. I mean, it is increasing our density if we have more housing units, and that allows people to live with a smaller carbon footprint.
Any other comments? Did anything surprise anybody?
I was surprised by the first choice. I wonder what people think of as underutilized areas of Traverse City.
Does anybody want to explain what underutilized means to them? Like when you were ranking this, what you thought of?
So I'll say I ranked it lower because in my mind that to me was basically, build out in the areas that have more parking lots and, to me it made me think of pushing it to the edges of town. So other people might have thought that that could be converting, I don't know, a property that's underused or needs redevelopment. And so I could see there being a difference on that. But I guess the one thing I would say as I looked at all these options is, and I know that's not the goal here, but just as a reminder, since this is a public meeting, all of these I don't think have to be done exclusive of any others. And I know that's what Planning Commission's working on with some policies they're working on now. I know that's the goal of the City Commission. So I appreciate that we're kind of all having these discussions to understand what we might be thinking of underutilized or other phrases. But I think that all of these are very doable for us to work into new and updated policies.
I think that's a great point. And you'll see that they're all within one or two of each other. So it's a pretty good balance that everybody, I'm not going to make assumptions. I'm going to stop there. Any other comments?
I saw the first one as adding multifamily housing around places where you could walk to the supermarket, you can get on a bus, like around where Family Fair is, for example. That's how I saw that item.
And I would say that these stated priorities are vague and open to interpretation by different members, so that underutilized areas of the city could mean a vacant lot. It could be a portion of a lot that is on a corner of two streets and you could easily fit a second house there. It could be an area that is a parking lot right now, or otherwise not serving a productive use. It could be a parcel with a small single-story building that could have a larger three-story building, which could provide multiple housing units.
Okay. The next question is, how ready are you to take action on these topics? And you're ranking these from I'll never be ready to completely ready, let's do this, let's get this started. So in between you have not ready yet, it needs lots of work. We're in progress, needs some work. We're almost ready, and it needs a little bit more work to completely ready. So you're looking at educate and build awareness to promote increased housing density, provide incentives for housing development, support and transformation of underutilized areas, removing regulatory barriers, ensure housing is developed within the context of the climate crisis, and provide for diverse and inclusive housing options.
Human rights over there having fun again.
Really?
So kind of as Amy had mentioned, it looks like a lot of these items were pretty close. We have the provide incentives for housing development, that's right in the middle there. Kind of in progress, needs some work. But the other items all look like you're getting closer to, let's do this, let's get this done. There might be a little bit of work left to be done to be able to do that or move this forward. Does anybody have any comments based on their responses?
You know, I chose numbers a little more conservatively about, you know, things like educate and promote increased, you know, housing, promote the increased housing density. There's a lot of confusion about what that might mean to a lot of people in town. And so, you know, we're looking forward at the Planning Commission with really getting down to the details of what we're talking about in terms of removing barriers. You know, we're ready to remove barriers, but in order to do that, we want to, you know, build consensus. And so it all is kind of happening at the same time. I'd say you know, we're ready to do all these things as long as we're all sort of on the same page of what that means. And so as we get there, I'm excited to get there with these two bodies and with Traverse City in general. Just that, you know, this is the work, you know, that we're engaging in, and hopefully we'll keep it moving.
And I guess I would say, a different vein, but similar, giving a little explanation, I ranked the provide incentives for housing development as a lower number, not because I don't think it's important, but because I know that we're waiting on the state, for example, to come out with their new pilot rules, and we're discussing it now and potentially working on a policy for NEZs. All of that takes a little bit of time, so it's not at a 5, but it doesn't mean that it's not important.
I'm surprised to see the optimism for ensuring that housing is developed within the context of climate crisis, since the Planning Commission has been working on a riparian buffer ordinance for almost 3 years, and it hasn't gone anywhere.
Any other comments? And you'll see, I should have pointed this out, you know, behind the line there, you kind of see the lighter kind of hills and valleys. That's kind of where the votes came in. Those changed as you turn in your votes there. So you can see like the pink line there, you know, had some more in the middle and at the end versus the yellow line that kind of was very similar throughout for the number. Next question, to what degree do you support the following actions to achieve your housing goals? So strongly disagree to agree. You're collaborating with partners, develop resources using current staff time and budget, develop resources using more than current staff or budget capacity. So that would include adding employees or additional funds to your budget. Provide direct public financing for housing development. Provide indirect public financing for housing development, and then an inclusive housing millage. Okay, I believe that's everyone. So you see collaborate with partners is very high. Provide indirect public financing is 7.6. Develop resources using current staff time and budget, 7.2. Any comments from anyone or explanations? Anything surprise you? Okay. Last question is, how often should our ordinance be updated to achieve our housing goals? Okay. Looks like we have 5 that were for annually, 4 continuously, and 3 for semi-annually. Nobody said every 5 years after the master plan. That's great. I'm happy to hear that for it. I think annually is a great goal to be updating your plan and, your zoning ordinance and at least reviewing it continuously as time, allows you to do that. And as items come up, I think that's important as well. Your zoning ordinance is a living document that should change with time. Any comments, questions related to this?
Yeah,
Mike?
I voted annually, but if we used ranked choice voting, I would think that more often than annually would have won. It would have had 7 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the one thing to consider here is that I feel like our planning department is seriously understaffed. And until we get more staff, it'd be hard to ask for these kind of changes to happen more often or continuously until we get more personnel.
And just to clarify by meetings, I voted, for example, for continuously because I also what I didn't want it to read as is, once a year at the budget or something, we can bring this forward for change. If something is an aha moment or comes back from a conference and, Sean comes back from a conference and says, boy, somebody's got this great thing going, I'd like to start looking at that for us. I don't want it to feel like there's a restriction of, well, we just made some changes, so start a list and we can tackle that again in a year. That's where I was at continuously. I agree with Linda that it's an understaffed department, so I don't expect them to be plucking ideas out of the air all the time to, look creative and have things on presentation papers with not much that they can do behind it. But I think being open to hearing from the Planning Commission, Sean as our planner, at least as a city commissioner, I'm open to that at any time.
Same. I was worried about annually. I also voted for continuously because annually scares me, as in like you're doing all the things, making all the changes at one time. And I just thought that would be offensive to some members of the public. So I thought that continuously would be like gradual, and as they're coming up or as the ideas come about, we're addressing them and commenting on them and passing or not passing. And yeah.
The reason I chose annually is I'm thinking of this as a goal, an annual goal, where you would look back over the previous year at what you achieved, what you didn't achieve, and what you should carry over. I was torn between continuously and annually, but in looking at that way, that's why I thought annually was a good idea.
I'd also like to point out the vocal minority that has been emailing the Planning Commission about can't make changes, got to wait for the master plan, can't make changes. You're jumping the gun, you're putting the cart before the horse. And again, yes, there's two sides to that school of thought. I think it's a vocal minority that's saying that to us. But again, that's why I said annually, but obviously I'm open to reviewing it anytime we have something that comes up that's worthy of our attention.
I had selected semi-annually. And the reason is that the Planning Commission works continuously on zoning. We're always looking at things that come up, and housing is always on our radar. But I had thought about looking at housing and just saying, okay, open up all the ordinances and all the neighborhoods and stuff, do a full review of what it is about housing that we have, what can we tweak, what can we do. I think doing that every year might get a little tedious, and if we did it every 2 years, we can get really granular about, because it's a lot of text, to go through all of the zoning that is related to our housing. I feel like we've got some good momentum right now for tweaking some zoning and really allowing more housing opportunities within Traverse City. But it's been on our list for 3 years, on our goals list for 3 years, and it's only now that I feel like we're coming to a point where we can really have that education within ourselves and with the community and vote this through. It sort of leads me to the next question about how it relates to the master plan. If a lot of I know that we're not talking about specific elements of our zoning proposed changes, but if our proposed changes land in the rearview mirror because we move them forward, how does it exist then on our master plan that we put forth for the next number of years? Was that an unclear question?
Oh. I was
it's just a
thinking
comment.
rhetorical.
It really is
Just
just a comment. It's
Okay.
rhetorical.
Okay. That's how I took it. I'm sorry. Any other comments? Okay. We are at the end of our time. I'm over my time that Sean told me I could have already, so I will wrap up. It was great discussion tonight. Thank you so much for participating. Hopefully you liked kind of the Mentimeter to be able to see and interact, to maybe gain some consensus for moving forward related to housing or your ordinance. So I just quickly want to give you an update on upcoming community engagement opportunities related specifically to the master plan. We have between April 19th and 21st, we're going to be out doing some neighborhood listening sessions. So we're going to, I think we have 9 or 10 kind of stops on our tour throughout the city. We're working on locations, exact dates and times, but essentially we're going to try to get into a place that's near the neighborhoods we're talking about, invite the public in to give us some community engagement. And listen to what's going on. We're hoping to do a little bit of refinement for our enhanced transform activity that was at the open house. We found, or we heard, certain neighborhoods need to be transformed or certain neighborhoods need to be enhanced. Now we're going to kind of go and say, okay, what in the neighborhood should be preserved or enhanced or transformed, specific to kind of each of the neighborhoods, or locations maybe that need to be transformed, but potentially maybe a core needs to be preserved. So getting a little bit more in depth in the neighborhoods. And so I think we have most of our gatherings have 2 or 3, maybe 4 neighborhoods kind of all coming together, and that includes either formal associations, non-formal associations, or groups that don't have any association. So it's welcome to everybody. It's not put on by one association or group. It's a city event for the master plan. So be sure to check the Traverse City Master Plan.org website for specific locations. There also will be a postcard going out that will tell everybody where, when for them.
So kind of off of Commissioner Warner's comments earlier, would it, and I know how intricate these things can be and how you guys are I saw the schedule of places you all are going to be, and it's crazy. But maybe I would throw out there, consider doing one of the neighborhood ones on Zoom, where general people who either aren't in a certain neighborhood or couldn't make it to their neighborhood's night, or maybe aren't super engaged with their neighborhood association, could also feel welcome to join and be able to get the QR code and just watch from home and still participate, just to kind of do that additional little bit of outreach without having to add another stop on your tour. So just throwing that out there as maybe an idea to do a little bit more engagement because neighborhood association participation can vary wildly from neighborhood to neighborhood, so.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you. The other item we have is on April 26th. We're doing some scenario planning. This is from 4 to 6 at Hickory Hills. This scenario planning is going to be related to 3 corridors within the city. We're going to be looking at 14th Street, 8th and Garfield, and Munson between the college to the city limits. Looking at those a little bit more detail, getting some input from whoever stops by on that day. So that is on the calendar for that time and the date for anybody that wants to take a look at that. But we will also be pushing that out with Colleen as well. So.
Question about the neighborhood meetings and how, and just general engagement. You covered, some engagement on tourism, but as discussed, we might have missed some people. Would surveys regarding sustainable tourism and or housing or these things be included with these neighborhood meetings? Could there be surveys ready around the same time as those neighborhood meetings so that, whether at the meeting, after the meeting, people could pass it around, share the link, spread the word, and gather more information from that? Might that be included?
That might be an option. We'd have to take a look and see if that's something we could include. We are going to be doing a survey that's related to the transform, preserve, enhance in the neighborhoods for either you to take home when you leave the neighborhood or for individuals that are not able to attend. That's part of it that we've discussed, but I will make note of your comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on this study session is an update as it relates to the mobility action plan. So you're going to introduce that also, Sean?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Sarah, for that discussion update. And so with us, we have Suzanne Schultz from Progressive AE. She'll be giving the update of the mobility action plan as well as the TART Trail Improvement and Extension Project.
So you're going to combine them both together at the same time? So I don't have to introduce it again?
And I'll do it with interpretive dance, yes.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Sean, is this, I think this is it? Is that one? Sorry. Okay. Great. Thank you for having me tonight. We're getting to a very exciting point in the Mobility Action Plan process. I'm going to share with you kind of where we've been with the Leadership Committee. That we're doing some tactical engagement projects as part of the work so that the community can see some experiments. It's one of those low-cost, kind of quick interventions that we can do in different ways to start conversations. We'll talk about the Draft Mobility Network and next steps for that. So for the Leadership Committee, they've been working really hard. They've had 3 meetings since the new year, in addition to your joint, well, actually 2 meetings in addition to the joint meeting. We had, no, I'm sorry, 3. I can't count, apparently. We did the vision and goals and branding for Complete Streets Policy and asked them to identify tactical engagement projects. And then we refined the tactical engagement project list, which I'll share with you, and shared the findings from tool design on the Draft Mobility Network maps that you'll see tonight. Then on March 8th, they reviewed those maps again and had extensive discussion, and then reviewed the agenda for the community open house, which is this Wednesday. So the tactical engagement projects, they looked at the number. There was a lot of brainstorming that went on and identified 4 potential locations for those engagement processes. And I'll walk you just briefly through each one. 8th Street, looking at by 8th and Garfield, removing the parking along 8th Street and improving a streetscape with placemaking features. It's kind of a sleepy area with a lot of opportunity. And so they'll be looking at opportunities to kind of take over some of that space for other activities. So it can be outdoor seating, it can have vegetation, you can do a number of different things in those spaces. I don't know if you're familiar with Parking Day, so it's kind of a Parking Day-like event. Union Street is the second one. This is an experiment with mid-block crossings and looking at ball outs and art. So really looking at how can you do a curb extension out with a mid-block crossing, very similar to what you already have on Front Street, but then including that art and narrowing the roadway to also calm traffic. The next one is 14th Street, putting in a median to try to improve crossing. As you know, traffic travels fast along in there, and with its proximity to the commercial district in the field, there's a lot of activity. So really trying to calm that street down, providing improved facilities for bicycles as well. You don't have a lot of curb cuts in that location, which also allows for some of that to occur further down. For Franklin Street, really trying to connect to the Boardman Trail from 8th Street. And in this, it's really taking over a portion of the road for bicycle facilities. So looking at opportunities to kind of borrow from some of the street for the bikes or pedestrians. So the schedule, looking at, we're doing the engineering concepts right now, looking at the schedule and gathering materials, and we're aiming to do implementation in May. Are there any questions on the tactical engagement pieces? Yeah.
So what were the vision and goals?
The vision and goals for the overall for the mobility action plan?
Or for these 4 items even, whichever.
So they didn't define vision and goals specific for each one. The goal here for any one of these is to obviously calm traffic, right? And so really trying to rebalance the street for pedestrians and bicyclists from cars and improve connectivity in different networks. So each one has kind of a different purpose, but that was the central piece of it. We are, for vision and goals, we took the information that you had in January and refined it, and we will be sharing that on Wednesday at the community engagement process. We anticipated that there'd be a lot of discussion about the maps and the data that's going into the mobility action plan component tonight. So we did not include all of the vision and goals and values pieces that have been created that we'll be providing on Wednesday. So for the Draft Mobility Network, Tool Design is a nationally recognized mobility firm. They they're one of the top 3 when we look at who's doing this work in this space, and how they do the work is really data driven. We've been, from a philosophical standpoint, to us it's both qualitative and quantitative. So this qualitative piece really comes through the community engagement process and what we're hearing from the community and in discussions with everyone. The quantitative is that data piece that starts to look at the numbers and what's really happening from a trend standpoint in Traverse City, as well as kind of where are those hot spots and what are the things we need to be thinking about. So when we look at, for example, modes of transportation to work, what's really exciting is that you can see a decline in single occupancy vehicles, and you're starting to see some balancing out. Certainly COVID had a pretty big impact on things, but you're really seeing that the biggest shoot up is the work from home and how much that's changed. You can also start to see that in transportation numbers in the network. But overall, even when people are traveling, Traverse City compared to the statewide average, you're doing better for carpooling and public transit, for walking and biking to work. And so really kind of shifting some of that when we talk about transportation demand management. It's how do we balance the system in a way that you don't have to drive, you have other mobility options that work just as well, and so people can feel like they can be inclined to take them without a huge inconvenience. So Tool mapped the existing bike network that's here today, where you have existing bike lanes and cycle track and trails. They also looked at sidewalks and those locations. and then existing traffic volumes. And so you can see on the maps, the darker the color, the more traffic that is present. And then we looked at safety data, where are the crashes happening for cyclists. There's also a slide for pedestrians. What is the density of crashes? So how often is that happening when we have crashes, and where are those located? You can see certain key areas along, they're both main routes, but also you see some pieces on Tart Trail, and which will be the other part of the presentation. And then, as I mentioned, pedestrian crashes and locating those. And they're marked with the safety data by looking at if it was a minor injury, a major injury, if it was fatal. So we identify those locations. And the same thing for pedestrian crashes, where do those occur the most? And all that information feeds into thinking about kind of how do we use our streets, what is the volume that we're working in, where are people comfortable, and it really leads to the idea of kind of the level of stress you'd have. And when we talk about low traffic stress to high traffic stress, it also speaks to different types of users. So if it's a low traffic stress street, you're thinking of parents with children who are riding, inexperienced riders can ride on a low stress street. So that might be a neighborhood street. Then on kind of the next level up might be something where you're comfortable on a bike, but you're not a road warrior. That's kind of what most people are. You range in that 2 and 3 range, where you're okay on a bike, but that's not your go-to thing where you feel like you'd be comfortable driving aggressively, riding aggressively in traffic, which is the number 4. And so we look at kind of the level of stress and how that network is working, and that gets mapped based off of the data that's received with those traffic volumes, crash data, the width of the street, and other things. And so they look at that piece and where those low stress streets are. Obviously the blue, again, is your low stress, which are your neighborhood streets for the most part. And then, no surprise, your MDOT route is the high stress street. And you can even narrow that down, so this is for bicycles, but also for pedestrians, and looking at those just as well. And what I love about these maps, and when we look at data and we combine it with the community engagement information that we get, so this was the heat map that was created from the public engagement effort that we had in the fall, where we asked people to map with those dots on the big billboard map that we had, areas where they avoid walking and cycling. And so if you compare that heat map that we heard with the stress map, that statistically we can look at and say this is what the quantitative data is showing us, people intuitively know. And of course, they're mostly the major streets and intersections. And so trying to think about how do we move then and traverse those major corridors, where are there existing signals and hawks and the rapid flashing beacons, the location of those that might make it easier for pedestrians to cross. And so we can also notice gaps in there where you might have to go long distances before you can get a crossing. The good location is, like, for example, East Front Street, where Grandview Parkway comes in and where that terminates. That was a big point of discussion with MDOT about needing a pedestrian crossing there because they're so far apart on the east end of downtown. Yes, Commissioner.
Was there any discussion about including the stop for pedestrian signs and where they're located? Because my experience is those are significant.
I don't know if there was discussion about locating those signs. I mean, they're not there year round.
Yes, they are.
Mm-hmm. The ones on the, I was thinking of the ones that you put in the street. You're talking about the ones
haven't been in the street in several years.
Okay.
They're on the curb.
Okay.
So on the next slide that shows distance to nearest crossing, so on Front Street, there's an excellent crossing at Oak and an excellent crossing at Hall Street. And you could probably find some others on here.
Yeah, the Garfield crossing that's by the old, it's a great crossing.
Okay.
And then on this map, like 12th and Cass is a four-way stop, so why wouldn't that be considered a good crossing? Or 10th and Cass as well? There might be a reason that it's not a comfortable crossing, but a four-way stop generally, most automobiles honor it.
Ooh, I beg to differ.
Four-way stop.
I beg to differ.
That's why we put them in at some places.
I don't know. I can find out for you, though.
I would appreciate that data as well, because Commissioner Warner's correct, but if we see where it's the red and the orange, it's the north-south. And I think that especially there, because it does tend to be the commuters, I will see people waiting on bikes, maybe going east-west or even north-south sometimes, that while they're saddling up again or something, somebody just goes through the intersection. Now you've made it uncomfortable. So if that's part of the data and that we could get a hold of, I'd appreciate reading that as well, because to Commissioner Warner's point, technically those are supposed to be there to facilitate travel. If they're not doing well, maybe we need to look at other options in some of those major intersections. Because I see that in Woodmere as well. I wasn't going to bring it up since I did, but since we're already talking about it. Woodmere, I drive down that or walk down it or bike down it very frequently. It's one where people are comfortable to a point, but once you actually start past the intersection at Hannah, there's bike lanes there. They're very wide. They're very rarely marked with bikes and or very infrequently, and people use it as turn lanes all the time. And so I don't bike down that part of the road because half the time somebody's going to come up behind me and try and turn into either another street or a business along that stretch, and it's ineffective for what it's designed as. And so I'd like to, if that's the case in some of these other areas that I don't traverse as much in different ways, I'd be curious about that as well.
So your question there is, are the bicycle facilities that are there operating as true
Right,
bicycle
exactly. Are they
facilities?
really facilitating, or do we need to look at other solutions?
As well as the pedestrian ones.
Yes, definitely.
So, and when you mean pedestrian ones, that would be like the four-way stop example to try to slow down cars and make crossings easier?
Yep, and the installed,
Stop for pedestrian
yes,
signs.
the local stop for pedestrian signs. There's how many are there?
3 or 4.
6?
I think there's about 6, right?
Yeah, I think there's 5 to 6 of them, ish.
So the level of effectiveness, I mean, some of it you can tell if it's being used as a left-hand turn lane because you can see the gravel marks or you can observe it. Some of it's going to, unless you're out there observing it, or we have police data, if there's ticketing, which it depends on the level of compliance that if the police are monitoring, I think that's difficult information to gather to really know. But I will ask Tool and see if they have been able to do that before. Okay. They also looked at missing sidewalks, again, those pedestrian connections and where those are at. And then pulling from standards from NACDO. So NACDO is really the recognized kind of source. You got Federal Highway, there's all these different places, but NACDO is really the one that's designed for urban centers and really trying to focus on walkability and that balance between modes. So when we look at the table, we talk about kind of what's the target speed that we're trying to aim for, what's the volume, kind of the design of the street and operational characteristics, and then how does that information then translate to accommodations for bicycle facilities for people. For example, if we look at kind of the different types of facilities, you can go from everything from a shared street, which is really a curbless street. You have that on Barlow as an example, to all the way to protected bike lanes or buffered bike lanes where they're really designed as separated facilities, such as you have on 8th Street with what's more protected because it's up on the curb, so the curb is protecting it. But then conventional bike lanes, bike boulevards, which are usually on low-stress streets. And so you have this gradation of different types of facilities you can choose for different purposes, but there's characteristics. It's not one size fits all on every street, and not every street is going to be able to pull from every different facility type. Does that make sense? So there may be, for example, if we took Grandview Parkway as an example, I mean, you have a separated facility, but let's say you didn't. And you said, well, I'm going to put an on-street bike lane here and just stripe it for 5 feet, but you know you've got heavy traffic with campers and speeds and volumes. That wouldn't be the best type of facility to locate there. You'd want to do it separated, which is what you have with the TART trail. So we have to look at the characteristics and the context of the street when we're making recommendations about where these facilities should go. Ultimately, though, I do want to say that every street should be designed for all modes and all users. The balance is trying to figure out kind of which modal emphasis in some cases you have to choose from, because you only have so much right-of-way. You can't, if you could choose all of it, you know, I want 10 feet for bikes, and I want on-street parking, and I want this travel lane, and I want outdoor dining, and I want, you know, plenty of sidewalk. You start to add all of those up, you don't have enough space in most cases for all of it. So you do have trade-offs when you're looking at these. So this is the draft bike network map that was presented to the leadership committee in February and then discussed in March. And so they reviewed the purple lines, which are where there's the Vision Bike Network. So we're not prescribing in this what the different facilities would be for bicycles right now. It's just these are the primary routes that make the most sense from a connectivity standpoint. And so in looking at that, it's where does it connect to existing trails? Where is user data? So if we look at Strava data, for example, and not that everybody uses Strava, but how does that connect, just to get an idea of where that goes? The safety data and crash data that we already covered, the width of the road and how that works. So this was the draft map that was created for their discussion. Commissioner Warner?
So how did that data end up not having a facility along Front Street from Pine all the way down to Railroad when one currently exists? And what was the discussion that happened at the leadership team about not having a bicycle facility from Pine all the way down Front Street to Railroad?
Yeah, the leadership committee was split on that with that facility, and as a result of that, I'll show you the next map from that discussion. But
so how did it come to be, first of all? How did it not, why wasn't it included?
It wasn't covered for several reasons, because the current bike lane where it's at, you have minimums against minimums. So I mentioned, you know, you only have so much space. Pedestrian traffic on Front Street is significant, and from prior public input we've heard, and even during the input we've had last fall, was that the sidewalks aren't big enough. That's the common comment we hear about Front Street, is their sidewalks aren't big enough. And so when we talk about space, and you have the sidewalk space for pedestrians, you have on-street parking, and then you have bike lanes that are 5 feet. Where the bike lanes are currently placed is in the door zone for cars. So if somebody opens up the door, you are in the door zone, and you have minimum widths for your lane widths. So that was one consideration when we talk about safety, about whether or not that made sense. The continuity also of the system, if you look at where the Civic Center is and how this connects through the Civic Center and all the way across, it provides more connectivity, especially when you look at where you have 8th Street and what's along the parkway with the TART trail. So the spacing also comes into play of the facilities, but the connectivity is the big piece. And it's not to say that that Front Street is not a bikeable street. That's where this next version comes from, is some of the conversation that we've had. And when we look at the facilities, we've identified now both Front as well as State on this map, but it's also understanding that it's not, it may not be the same type of facility or the same type of design for a street. You may say, for example, Front Street really should be a shared street and maybe needs to be more aggressively designed as a shared street. whereas maybe State Street has a different kind of bicycle facility to be able to provide that crosstown connection, which is what we see in the data that we're looking at, especially the Strava data, which is in the TART Trail
But
presentation.
you just told us that all streets for all users. And you are aware that the City Commission approved a complete streets resolution with the intent of having a complete streets policy.
Correct.
And you do understand what a complete street is?
I do.
Okay, so you're saying that Front Street should be a shared street, so families, octogenarians should just share the space with cars and bike down Front Street?
They're going to obviously walk on the sidewalk. I mean, there's edges when you define a shared
Somebody
street.
bicycling with a family or an octogenarian should just share Front Street with the cars. We're going to eliminate the bike lanes, and we're just going to encourage them to be careful and bike down Front Street.
As of right now, there's no biking allowed on Front Street. There are signs everywhere that say no bikes on sidewalks. So
We
you
have a bike lane on Front Street. I bike it at least once a day, all year round.
So the average speed, certainly when we look at safety, speed is a big factor. And if you think about your experience on Front Street, on cars, we looked at the speed on it. The speed day is like it's 15 miles per hour in the summertime. Cars are driving slowly along that entire corridor versus State Street. People frequently drive over 30 miles per hour. Now with the two-way, that was part of the two-way discussion with State Street, that was one of the reasons to convert to two-way, was to try to slow down the car. So the experience on State is different than it is on Front.
You lost me, but okay.
I think the issue you're trying to get to is that without eliminating a lane or without eliminating parking probably on one side of the street on Front Street, the spacing and the speed is not conducive to having bicycle traffic on the street.
I would say you could still have bicycle traffic on the street, but we wouldn't recommend a designated facility, like we wouldn't recommend striping for the bikes. You can put sharrows there so that they have flexibility to ride outside of the door zone, but putting a bike lane right up against parked cars when you know how the cars park along Front Street is a challenge. And again, trying to do minimums next to minimums when you have a slow street like that doesn't make a lot of sense from that point of view. But it's not to say that you can't or shouldn't bike down Front Street, or that we should design Front Street so you can't ride your bike on it. It's changing the context. And when we look at the context of Front, it's different than it is at State right now. Now, it can change on State Street, but the context on Front is with the buildings all along the edge. You don't have a lot of voids. You've got that sidewalk. We know pedestrians are the #1 priority. If we were to do a separated bicycle facility on Front Street, we would have concerns about safety because the speed at which bicycles might travel, that's why they're not allowed on sidewalks. Trying to cross the street, if you have a fully separated facility, people are going to be more inclined to go fast. And so you might have more pedestrian and bicycle conflicts just because of designating that facility. One of the benefits of a shared facility is that people aren't quite sure, so it actually makes it safer because they're not quite sure what to do, so they're going to behave in a different way than if they think, well, this is only my space, and they're going to behave differently and more aggressively.
To me, it sounds like a lack of creativity. You're saying because there's a door zone, we're going to eliminate any sort of facilities for bicycles, and we're going to let the octogenarian and the family just bike in the street.
Well, you have the TART trails right next to it.
You could just close the street to automobiles and say, you've got the parkway over there, why don't you go use that? That's the same approach.
And that could be it. I mean, you close it now and make sure when you've had events before that it's not everything everywhere. So if that was the same philosophy.
Complete streets means all users everywhere.
I don't think that's a reality, though.
That's what it means, all users.
Well, then I guess maybe we have to change the definition.
No, it means we need people that are actually working to try to make it happen, not people that are saying, well, it's not working right now, so I guess now and forever, no bicycles on Front Street.
Well, Tim, you talk about creative, come up with one. Come up with one. No, you're the one who keeps saying be creative.
Right, we're paying them. We're paying them
But you've
money.
got something in your head.
Yes,
I know you
bicycles belong on Front Street.
You've got something in your head. You want to take out a side of parking?
No, bicycles belong on Front
You
Street.
want to take out a side of parking? Come on, Tim, you've got an idea. You've got something you want to see happen.
No, I want to see families biking down Front Street. That's what I want to see happen.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Well, that's one opinion.
Yep,
Which,
one opinion.
continue, please.
Yeah, and I just want to say, when we look at, I mean, this network is on the major streets, so if we were looking at, I mean, every street, then every facility on every street would take a lot of resources. So we're trying to choose the best routes that we think are the safest and make the most sense for the connectivity of the network. That's one thing that when we talk about streets, we really have to think in networks when we look at that. So one of the challenges is you may have, there may be a recommendation at some point on one of the streets that we've identified as a bike priority street, where you say, well, this one section has on-street parking, and that really is a barrier to make this connection work. And so you have to think about the entire network when you're looking at that, not just that one block and how that one block functions. So politically, that can sometimes be difficult because you'll have business owners say, I don't want to lose my on-street parking. And you're looking at that for that bicycle facility. So there's, again, those trade-offs when we talk about how much we're going to fit into this space and how that's going to work. This map that was prepared, we didn't have time to be able to get it into your packets because of the deadline with the advisory or the leadership committee meeting just last week. But this map does show, and it does offer the opportunity for the public to comment on the Front Street versus State Street, but on any other street that we've identified throughout the city for those bicycle facilities. So community input, I mentioned that qualitative data is just important as the quantitative data when we're looking at this because we do want to make sure that it works for people. So the input on Wednesday will also be asking the public to test the map and to take a look at it, and we'll take that into account. This is an iterative process, so we had that first map that was shown that the leadership committee reviewed. We got their input. We have this revised map. We're going to go share that with the public. That's more data that we're going to do and take that in when we're looking at the map. And then the leadership committee will take another shot at it and have some more discussion. So it's by no means settled business, but it's just trying to work through that process and being very thoughtful about how all of these components work together. And then there's diagrams. This is a merged version, but then we also pulled out separately potential crossing improvements. So this is certainly pertinent to the questions that you just asked about the pedestrian crossing signs and how those work. So we can take that information and make sure that it's aligning with the recommendations for potential locations. Yes.
And so just to be clear, the map that I'm looking at in the packet that says potential improvements combined does not have the bike lane for front, but nope, the one you were just on, this one
okay,
has bike lanes on front. So this is the more up-to-date one, not the one in our packet.
Correct.
So the part that's removed from front on the one that we're looking at is only that tiny section down toward Delamar. But on that one, front is still suggested and included as a bike mode of transportation, correct? Because it's in purple, front, the entire chunk of front
right
that Tim was talking about is in purple on this map. And I just want to confirm that this is the more up-to-date one.
Correct, because the leadership committee was torn on which
front
on
specifically.
front versus
Great.
state, and so we said let's put them both on and let the public discuss it on Wednesday.
Great, thank
So,
you.
yep.
I just wanted to confirm.
Yep, so they're both on there, and the reason you've got that gap is because now we're going to have East Front Street turning into with the signal located there as you go on Grandview Parkway. So the
Mhm.
idea is then you would cross over to Tart using that crossing,
Got
and then
it.
you've got the Tart Trail the other way too. So
should that be purple where it says East Front Street and it's just not purple because it says East Front Street right there?
That could be, I'd have to blow it up to take a look at it. We can double check. But we just received the map today from Tool, so.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But I don't think you'd want to have, well, East Front Street, how it connects, a portion of East Front Street is also going to be changed. We'll take a look at that.
It is on the current one, the outdated, quote unquote, the one that's in our packet. It is purple, and then the text East Front is just moved over. So I think it's just a matter of having to fit in the text.
Yeah, because that's right in front of the
Like the Coast Guard
NMC,
statue.
and the Coast Guard facility and the senior center, which obviously if we're spending all this money on the senior center, we want bicyclists to be able to get to the senior center, so.
Yep. Okay. So we talked about crossings, and then just really briefly, we also try to look at equity data when we're doing this work to make sure that we are reaching persons. To Commissioner Warner's point, not everybody shows up at community meetings, and usually it's persons who have disabilities or of lower income. They have other needs that sometimes prevent them from being active participants. So this is a way to make sure that we're being inclusive and that we're able to have persons who may have challenges with mobility be able to access the system. And so we look at kind of the density of these households and where they're at. So this is for the equity analysis disabilities, we look at English proficiency, poverty, and look at the poverty map where people of color may reside, and where there's a lack of vehicles in the household to get a sense of where those locations are at. And then for next steps, as I mentioned, this Wednesday, we're going to have our community event from 3 to 7 at the Alluvion. And we're going to be sharing the results of the community input that we had in the fall, and just reminding people of that and showing them what we did with that information. We'll have these maps available. We'll have the big billboard map that has that information, and then a street segment building activity, which really helps people understand that limited right-of-way, that you can only put so much, and it's always been fun. They're like strips of cardboard, and it's like, here's your street, try to fit what you want into it. And so it's a good conversation piece in an education piece about the challenges involved in doing all of the facilities. And then we'll have one more community event where we review the final draft map and then tie community improvements to it. We're also in the process of, we did an audit of your city policies and ordinances and plans, and so we called it the compendium. We have a whole list of all of those items, and we'll be looking and reviewing it and making suggestions on potential changes also from a policy perspective to have that really support the mobility action plan. And our goal is to be done by August. So there's that piece. Are there any questions? I'm used to touching my screens.
So the event on Wednesday is going to be like the previous one. There's going to be stations that people move around, and you can come in any time between 3 and 7, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, it'll be the open house format similar to last time. And we had so much fun. The input that we got from, we had just really great input from so many people, and we do have the report from the community engagement sessions last time available on the website. So if people want to see what was said and see the maps that were produced as a result of that engagement, they can go out and on the web and pull it up. Okay, so for the Tart Trail, just a quick update. So the enhanced Tart for the Bayfront really came about for a number of reasons. Tart, you have the busiest section that needs improvements to the trail system. Really this goal of making an aspirational system where it's the best in class for the trail. So what does that take? Right now there's limited space along the trail in a lot of locations that are very heavily used. There's also some safety concerns when we think about bicycles and pedestrians and how they mix, especially with e-bikes now and how people are using the trail. There is some friction that happens there and some concerns. And then looking at how this also coincides with the work that's going to happen along Grandview Parkway and this mobility action plan, the timing is really good because there are improvements that are recommended along the Grandview Parkway. So those were the reasons why we looked at it. And then we've been engaged in a community engagement process also as part of this, which I'll mention. So just the background, as I mentioned, to make it a trail network that really just not even serves the region, but really kind of a world-class trail network. And looking at how we have this proposed improvement to the existing trail, but then also an extension of the trail along Peninsula Drive, so that it would allow people to be better served who are using that. I mentioned the Strava data in the Mobility Action Plan discussion, and you can see based on the color of the lines, so the darker purple is the more heavily used trail portions, or where people are riding their bicycles. And so you can see that, especially that section just south of Eastern Avenue, that is really used by people going out to the peninsula. Yes, Commissioner?
Won't be a surprise because I've shared this with you before, but like my kids, their entire lives biking to school, they didn't use Strava. I see plenty of people out there biking on a daily basis throughout the year from a lower socioeconomic status, and that's their only means of transportation. It's pretty unlikely they're using Strava every day.
Yep.
So I just, yeah, this is some information, but it's not all that helpful.
Well, it's an indicator of use. I mean, it tells where people are riding.
People
so
of
it's
means, where people of means are riding, and typically for recreation, not for transportation.
I don't know how TART, if they can discern who the riders are on the trail, but they are seeing monthly trips ranging from 2,000 to 23,000 users. So they had 1 million riders in their system last year, and so it's been wildly successful, and it really starts to create those connections in difficult places while still enjoying the natural environment being along the bay. So we have examples where this has been done, where we have robust trails in a more urban setting, such as the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, the DeQuinder Cut in Detroit. You've got the Beltline in Atlanta. You've got the Lakefront Trail in Chicago, in the Mackinac Island Loop. Just examples. When we look at the width of these trails, you're looking at up to 25 feet for the Cultural Trail or 20 for DeQuinder. But really, we're looking more at the Atlanta, Chicago, this 14-foot wide, 12-foot wide for Mackinac, just to give you an idea of where you might find, when you think of heavy pedestrian and bicycle traffic outside of Traverse City, that's kind of the width of those facilities that they have in other places. And so the design concepts, this starts at West End Beach at the parking lot, and we're really proposing a separated facility. It will act, it's not like you can't walk on the section where the bikes would be, but it's really trying to split them up a little bit more so there's more defined space for both users. Again, you're familiar with it because of 8th Street, but looking at providing that pedestrian pathway as well as opportunities for amenities such as benches, seating areas, and other things. So this would just propose the blue is the pedestrian pathway, the pink is the cycle trail and where those could go. So there's opportunities for divergence between the users, which makes it a little bit nicer for both. It also prevents if somebody's trying to speed for the bicycles, even especially when you're looking at if they're doing commuting, that separated piece helps as well. We have limited right-of-way as we go further to the east from that edge, and certainly over Murchie Bridge. There isn't a connection right now. You have to go under and kind of weave your way through on that really tight kind of hairpin turn. So thinking about how do we create that crossing over the Boardman River, but also how do we navigate some of these more difficult locations like by Delamar. There's a grade there, and then you have their loading zone, and I'll show you some pictures of potential solutions that we've discussed. And then certainly as you go further east to Grandview Parkway and you get towards Peninsula, you have constrained rights-of-way there too. So the idea with Murchie Bridge, just as a design concept, is that this would go alongside the bridge area along facing West Bay. So there would be that potential. And then for
Before you move,
Delamar.
can you go back to that one, please?
Sure.
Has there been any discussion at the leadership team about the cottonwood tree on the northeast side there that currently exists?
I'm going to look at, I don't believe so.
Well, because it's removing it if you proceed with this.
And I'm sorry,
Okay.
what's the significance of the cottonwood tree?
Go
It's a
look at
large
it and
tree.
you'll see.
Okay. I will say that as and I'll talk about that in the community engagement. I'll hold that for a minute. So Delamar is a design challenge because of the grade and the width of the right-of-way there. So you don't have enough. There's not enough right-of-way that MDOT has to really expand that. So it would really have to be a partnership with Delamar to bring that down. And again, we talk about shared spaces. We just talked about that quite a bit. The idea here would be redesigning the context enough so that cars felt like they had to go slow, that they're in a shared space with pedestrians and cyclists, and there are treatments that you can do for that. But really having to change that edge, Delamar still has their operational concerns that we have to be aware of and respectful of, but trying to figure out how to provide a bigger or wider pedestrian and bicycle path there is an important consideration. So this is a diagram of what it could look like with kind of trying to switch some of it over. As we go further to the east, maintaining that trail, again, you get really pinched as you get closer towards the Blue Goat, but then diverting off on Peninsula and going along there. When we had discussions with the community the first round, which was last month, we presented this kind of agnostic green line in the middle of the street saying, we're not sure, where you think it should go. It's not laid out yet. We want your input. So it provided a lot of opportunity for good discussion. And what we really heard is that people favored the bay side of it as a two-way facility. So really pushing it to one side of Peninsula, which would allow for that connectivity all the way to the park and then all the way kind of wrapping around without having to worry about crossings as you get into that split. And then this would go up to Eastern in that location. So the top things that we heard in the first round was really the Delamar concerns and trying to figure that out. We did look at the connectivity and safety, but also cultural opportunities. So we have consulted with the Grand Traverse Band on opportunities to really do interpretive pieces and bring kind of that heritage into this as a concept. Stormwater's also been a piece of discussion, working with the Watershed Center and then certainly MDOT. So I mentioned the cultural interpretive pieces, looking at improvements for bicycle parking, places to rest, places for art. Where could we have those, places for respite? And then the community engagement events. So we had the 15th through the 17th last month, and then this month we're doing the same thing. Tomorrow night there's a virtual meeting, which is what we also offered last month. And then the next day, there are going to be several focus group meetings, kind of circling back to those that have been engaged in the process so far. But then also we offer 2 opportunities for input. We broke out kind of the old section and the new section. So the downtown piece is held closer towards the late afternoon, and then an evening meeting is held for the Peninsula neighbors. And we wanted to be sure we'd sent postcards to the Peninsula neighbors in particular, so that if they couldn't participate because they're out of town, because they're snowbirds or for something else, then they could participate in the virtual meeting. And so the timeline for this, we're almost done with the community engagement piece on this. We'll be working on finalizing the plans, and then grant submittals will occur. This project is over $8 million, so it's not an inexpensive endeavor, but the timeline, I think, does work well with MDOT's initiative with Grandview Parkway and how these pieces can come together. So I think it's a very compelling story that TART's been able to share in the success of how it's worked well for the region. And so they'll be pursuing funding and construction in the future. Any questions on the TART trail?
I will, nobody else is. So what's the process for finding the balance between the trail location, because there's been talk of, you know, moving it away from the highway. So we're using up parkland. So especially as we head toward the west, you know, west end of this project, it's pretty thin between the water and the parkway. So I understand wanting space between humans and cars, the parkway. But at the same time, the farther north we move it, the more of the very limited parkland that we're using up. And an example is as it goes by the volleyball courts having it split, which can be appealing, but at the same time, those folks that aren't currently in a volleyball game like to reside just onto the grass on their blanket or beach towel or something like that while they wait. So it's that uses. How do you balance uses? And then when you head way down toward Murchie Bridge, where there is no space to move away, the trail is, so just west of the bridge, the trail is right on top of the parkway. And so when it's forced to be on top of the parkway, I don't need the answer tonight, but I'm hoping that the leadership team and the consultants are working on how to make that both safe and comfortable from either a young child or an older person who mistakenly swerves because they're trying to avoid something real or perceived, or a motor vehicle that jumps the curb.
Yeah.
Because at the far end, we're trying to move it away for safety and comfort, but at this end, we're restricted and can't. So what do we do?
Yeah, that's always the design challenges with this is how do you achieve all those multiple goals? And certainly one of the reasons for the community input. I mean, if there is concern with the volleyball courts in that location and splitting the pedestrians from the cyclists there, I mean, that's the kind of input that we're looking for as part of this, so that we have that input, that there's different stakeholders involved, that they can share their concerns about it. And so that's important feedback. Okay. Anything else? All right.
Any other questions from the group? Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to open up for any public comment of this joint study session. Anybody got out there in the audience that got something they want to share with us? Great. Well, folks, the planning commission is free to leave if they would like to leave. Or you can stay for the rest of it. You can stay for Sean's report. Yeah.
Oh, we should stay for Sean.
Oh, you have a special panel.
Okay, with that, we're going to,
I didn't realize.
I'll give you we'll take a couple of minutes to take a break. Thank you.
I did too. I was.
See what was on it.
You could have been.
Some high-tech things you have to
Could have trolled us the whole time. Back and forth. Back and forth.
Yeah, the only thing.
Oh yeah.
I thought we were doing that first. And now it's 3 hours in. I'm horrified.
Mute everybody. He talks. Mute everybody.
Tomorrow morning?
No.
I mean, yes, we made all the plans.
Oh, you are?
Okay. So
You're gonna shift it when Benjamin sits down. I think I'm gonna move
It
time
was
around a little.
10 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah.
That's too bad.
It's really too bad.
Although it was.
Right, keep up the
So
momentum.
technically, it's part of a way to get some public engagement.
But we have to have a presentation.
They already have it.
They have, so it's next, Sean's report is next. I'll stay for Sean's report. Isn't that the end of the meeting, Sean? No, no.
Is it?
Sean,
Good.
another season.
Yeah.
Today was weirdly brutal, even though it wasn't that bad.
Is everybody staying for Sean's report?
I think we're getting a little late.
We're all kind of.
It's been a while.
It looks like it's next, right? But we've heard it, right? Yeah.
I still think it was an easy winter, but then when the cold does come, it's like.
But he did it the last week.
You do coffee on Saturday mornings?
Oh yeah, I'll take that.
But I want to get.
Wednesday, 40.
Generally, I will be drinking coffee Saturday mornings from here until I die, probably, but whether I go out socially for it. I have to see whether we're going to stick around in town this Saturday. I'm not sure. We're likely in town,
Oh, that's true.
but there's a chance.
Go sit out there for you.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you for directing me.
When does everyone change?
Yeah, it just comes and goes.
Yeah.
But it's like, just can't get into the spirit of like, this is great, look how beautiful, let's go.
We changed our.
Like today, like a little bit of fresh snow looks nice, but I'm kind of.
But his ears get.
Yeah, exactly.
Like here's a little, no, take it away, here's a little, take it away.
Right?
Sweet.
I noticed last week.
Did I get rid of space? Sorry. Can't help it.
Nope.
Oh, okay,
Last week the light went up at Eastern and
Has Bear met this creature?
What a fancy schmancy new digs here, man.
All three ways, like you read.
Well, I have to get used to it.
Sorry I was late, but Sean knew.
So I know when I
Okay,
was
that's good.
Oh, yeah. Babysitter. Yeah. You can all jump on the bed when the parents are away.
But it worked really well.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I love.
Well, that's
What?
yeah, that's cool. And that's a red light that
I'm excited for your California.
run at least half the time when I'm on a bicycle. Because when I come across the Eastern tour, if there's no vehicles, because there's some sensor, it doesn't sense a bicycle. So it goes through the cycle, doesn't see a car, just goes through the cycle.
We'll have another I think I like that there's more of these frequent joint sessions, so as every bit comes, we can kind of digest it instead of having one big, probably would have been 4-hour meeting at the end.
Like when they're,
Yeah.
it turns yellow and then red, and they're like, oh, it was close enough.
I like it.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It comes close to
So Chief, are you gonna escape now? The planning part's over?
I think.
Go ahead and get
for Sean's thing.
Oh, well, that's nice. That's nice.
Whatever, like I'm almost there, it's close enough. Whereas I don't remember
Stay
that
there,
from
you wanna
30
move
years
down
ago.
some?
Like, I thought people generally
No, Linda's right next to you.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
I like the every other one. You know, I didn't hate it during COVID when we had a little bit of space between us.
Into Palm Springs?
Alright.
I have a really
Cool
good
area.
This is
Let's go ahead and get started, please.
not even a quarter.
I don't know where Mitch went.
Good, I'll be here.
Would you mind telling Sean to come back in, please?
No, I'll get him.
Okay, now.
Shaking hands, kissing babies.
Hello.
All right.
We've been looking for you all day.
Next, we're on our last part of our second part of our study session, which is a report from our
Tim and I are gonna fight over that.
his annual report from Planning Director Sean Winter. I'm sure you got to get your computer going again.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get that file pulled up here real quick.
Got all
and
these screens?
Screen's turned back on.
Are we gonna have 5 votes after we
They're
make
coming in.
Oh.
This one's the last one.
Benjamin's gonna watch us over here because he's afraid we're gonna touch a button.
Okay.
All right, sorry for that delay. I thought it was at the end of the agenda, but we were asked to keep these a little shorter and a little more brief this year, so I'm going to just kind of whip through it. So as you know, the fundamental aspect of what we do in the planning department is adopt or create and implement the various planning documents, the grandest of them all being the community master plan, and of course we have other smaller subtopic plans such as mobility action plan. We also oversee the CIP process, and by that I mean we coordinate the meetings and the conversations to get that document put together for the Planning Commission. We also handle code enforcement, approval of all development reviews, as well as zoning amendments and changes that are either requested or initiated by staff or the Planning Commission to help implement the planning documents. So real quick, some numbers. We permitted 413 new dwelling units this year. That was through the 166 unique land use permits that we issued. We approved from a zoning standpoint 323 vacation home rentals, 74 sign permits, 38 tourist home licenses, a notice of violation ticket sent out 15 times, which does not reflect the amount of code enforcement that we actually do. Our goal is always compliant, so we hope to get the situation resolved before it gets to a ticket, and our code enforcement officer is pretty effective at that. We had 6 Historic District Commission requests and 1 BZA request. So you saw this in the master plan presentation on housing. When we discussed the community housing profile last year, we noted we had a significant jump from previous years in the number of dwelling units that we permitted with 447. But it was noted at that time that it only took a couple large projects with multiple families to really bump that up. So we didn't know what this next year was going to look like, but we were able to maintain that increase again. So a little less than last year or the year before, but a total of 413 new dwelling units. So the Planning Commission's goals for last year were to expand housing opportunities, create a riparian buffer zone ordinance, and begin the master plan and mobility bike action plan. We were successful in kicking off the master plan and the mobility bike action plan. However, the level of community engagement and involvement that both of those projects simultaneously required stretched staff quite thin, so we weren't able to move the needle on the housing or the riparian buffer zone ordinance the way we would have liked to. So with that, for 2023, the Planning Commission essentially rolled those goals over. So they've already started the conversations, if you paid attention in their meetings, about expanding the housing opportunities, and those are starting to gain momentum, as the chair had mentioned. The riparian buffer zone ordinance will probably take more time. We had it sent to the attorney for legal review. A lot of concerns were identified, and it needs to go to a lot of the department heads so they can weigh in. So we're looking at really more of a reconstruct of that draft that the ad hoc did. And then, of course, we want to complete and get adopted both of those plans. So that largely will be the focus for this year. We'll be also working with TART and the DDA on this TART project. And really excited actually for next year, even though it's pretty far out, but with 2 new planning documents in place, we're going to have a set of action plans that we can really focus in on for our activity in the department and at the Planning Commission level. That's it. The complete report is in your packet. So if you had any questions on it, I'd be happy to.
Does anyone have any questions? Of course, I think we heard quite a bit on a lot of the activity for this year just recently, within the last 20 minutes. So it's a lot of work. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Winter, for the presentation. I had the opportunity to attend one of the Planning Commission's meetings a few weeks ago, and the idea, there was a lot of great discussion, but an idea I thought I had heard was the possibility that at this joint meeting to maybe get some feedback about the potential actions by the Planning Commission to help facilitate more housing in Traverse City, or words kind of like that, I'm paraphrasing. But because we didn't have that opportunity necessarily, I would encourage anybody that's interested, that's up here, to reach out to Mr. Winter for a discussion about what the Planning Commission is working on, because there is some, I wouldn't say hesitancy, but a sense that I got from some of the members of the Planning Commission. They'd like to hear something from us. They don't want to send something to us that will just die or something like that. And I know there's 2 members of the Planning Commission here. You can speak to it as well. But any feedback ahead of time, I think, would be greatly appreciated.
Well, is that something that our next study session, that our joint one, that we can hopefully not have other items on there, but maybe there could be a little side discussion on that, Sean? Maybe?
Yep, we could do it that way, or we could do it at one of your regular study sessions, and I can kind of help facilitate that with what we've been talking about at the Planning Commission, along with the 2 planning commissioners that we have on the City Commission, and then report back to them.
You know, I think your second choice, in my humble opinion, your second choice would be better. That way we're all hearing it the same way, the same time. You know, and questions, we all hear the questions at the same time. So
jointly?
Well, no,
just you
one of our
presenting to
study
us.
sessions.
Present to you guys. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I can do that. I can work with Benjamin on picking a date for that.
All right.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Sean.
Anything else?
Anybody else have any questions for Sean? Thank you
Keep
for
up the
your
good work.
efforts. Okay. So before we leave here, we get to have one more opportunity for public comment for the study session. Okay. I'll adjourn. That means I'll adjourn the study session. We'll now go to our City Commission special meeting. So you guys have time. You may want to switch it over to your thing here so you know what we're doing here. Okay. On
Our iPads?
Yeah, our iCompass, there you go. Okay, what we have tonight is, last week we did introduce in many ways the the idea of moving forward with the grant application as it relates to the possible acquisition of 528 acres joining to the adjoining Brown Bridge. We would like to hold a public hearing next Monday night. In order to do so, we have to officially request that that the public hearing be put on the agenda. I think the public, through the stories, have been as well aware of what this is about. We can go into, and one of the first things that'll happen next week, there will be more of an in-depth presentation. So I'm hoping that you will be open to going with the recommended motion here to set that public hearing.
I'm willing to make a motion that a public hearing on the $2,343,919 grant request from the City of Traverse City to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund for acquisition of 528 acres adjacent to the Brown Bridge Quiet Area be scheduled for March 20th, 2023.
Yeah. Support. There's motion and support. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, I would encourage staff to, and outside assistance to provide whatever information can be helpful to the public. Because a public hearing, I just feel like they see this map, but in isolate, like, okay, so yeah, if they already come thumbs up, thumbs down, make a comment, but the more information that we can get into the public hands about, say, the neighborhood here, other land holdings, what Brown Bridge Trust Fund has been used for previously, what city charter allows it to be used for, just the more information the better, because at this point I know we have to go through the motion, but that's what it feels like to me. We're just going through a public hearing, and there's not really going to be a lot of information for the public to digest. The emails we've received so far, 8 to 10, I would say, are all from people that do not live in Traverse City, and they're greatly in support of this. A lot of them live on Spider Lake or vacation on Spider Lake. So yeah, I can see where they'd love it to have this protected. But how does it affect people that live in Traverse City proper? It's a good discussion.
Good. I know there's other information. Hopefully that there'll be a much more in-depth packet that'll be there'll be much more information in the packet, because I know we've had a history of how often Brown Bridge has been used and for what areas. So including that we're doing right now, using the royalties that aren't going into the trust, but for park projects. But all that has been decided by the public owners. One thing we didn't mention, I think, on the list that I saw out there, forgot to mention the when we bought the Preville Sargent property, so that needs to be put on the list too. So, okay. Any other questions from the commission?
No, I'd just like to say that many of the things that Commissioner Werner is asking for, I think will come out before the election, when people will have to vote on this. And I think setting the public hearing right now for going after that money seems an easy decision for me.
Yep. Okay. Unless anyone from the public. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Colbert?
Yes.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow?
Yes.
And Mayor Lewis?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll have public comment as relates to the special meeting. Don't see any. Okay. With that, this meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Here, 5 minutes.
No,
Done that
it
right in
was-
the beginning.
No, 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Today, it's like 3 something to Ben and Marty or Sean and Marty. For information on trails, we hear 2 million using about that. Mostly July, sort of thing. So what do we have available? And the Strava, to me, that's.
No, and I get the Strava.